And a worksheet does a couple things. It can pull all the information that we need to enter adjusting entries and prepare financial statements. Now, we won't be talking about adjustments until later in the semester. Preparing financial statements, we're going to be talking about that very shortly. And if you have a worksheet already sitting in front of you, it makes it very easy to prepare financial statements. But the worksheet itself is not a financial statement. It's not a formal part of the accounting system. In other words, it's not required by GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. Okay? It is, however, a tool. It's an excellent tool that accountants use to be able to prepare financial statements and enter adjusting entries. Now, if you work in all your transactions are put into an accounting system that's on software, then you generally do not need a worksheet. The software will keep track of everything for you. You still have to calculate out your own adjustments, but you don't really need the worksheet to do that. It'll give you a partial worksheet to help you, but you don't even need to do it. However, if you're doing things by hand, it is a huge, great tool. If you are doing that on actual accounting paper, then it's typically in a 10-column format paper, and you can get that kind of paper at Office Max or other office supply stores. However, it also works great with Excel, and so that's generally what we'll be using in Accounting 101 is using Excel. The next slideshow, or this next slide, this example that we're going to go through just shows the last 6 columns. We are not worried about the first 4 columns. The first 2 columns are the trial balance, and we already know how to do that. And the second set of 2 columns are where we put the adjustments. And we won't talk about the adjustments until later this semester. The third set of columns, of 2 columns, is the adjusted trial balance, and that's where we're started. So that's where you have the trial balance numbers, and now you've adjusted them for end of period adjustments, and you come up with the adjusted trial balance. These are the final numbers for that accounting period. That's what we're starting with. So here is for Amanda's campus delivery. Here is the last 6 columns already completed. Notice that we have all the names of the accounts. There's some accounts that are a little different from our trial balance because those involved adjustments. We have accumulated depreciation of delivery equipment. This is attached at the hip to delivery equipment, but notice delivery equipment is an asset, has a debit balance. Accumulated depreciation is a credit because it's a contra asset. Okay, we didn't have that when we did the trial balance. Okay, we have a few other accounts that we didn't have, wages payable and some extra expense accounts that we didn't have before. And these are all because of the adjustments that we will learn how to do later. Still with our adjusted trial balance, it's still like any other trial balance. We have to add up all our debits, and they have to equal the total of all the credits. If they don't, you can't go forward. You can't finish out this worksheet if your adjusted trial balance doesn't balance. Now for homework and for the next exam, I will be giving you the adjusted trial balance will already be filled in. So what you have to do is to put those numbers into the correct last 4 columns. And so we have the income statement, debit and credit of the income statement columns, debit and credit of the balance sheet columns. And so you have to decide each one of these accounts, does it go in the balance sheet columns or the income statement columns? And everything has to be totaled up in the final section. Okay, this just goes again over the fact that the adjusted trial balance shows all the accounts and it shows their balances, but the balances have been adjusted at the end of the accounting period. So these are the final balances. Okay, and then we're going to divide it out into income statement columns and balance sheet columns. The worksheet also gives us a check figure of net income. So when we go to do our income statement in financial statement section, we have a check figure to go back to check on. All right, so here we have the adjusted trial balance columns, and every account, we're going to put it either in the income statement column, we're going to copy it over to income statement column, or we're going to copy it to the balance sheet columns, but not both. Okay, and so we have to know, well, which accounts go in the income statement columns, which accounts go in the balance sheet columns. So the income statement columns, the income statement is there to show if management attained the #1 goal of business, which is profitability. And we know if a business has been profitable, we take the revenues minus the expenses, and if we have a positive number, then that's profit. We call it net income. If we have a negative number because expenses were too high, then we have a net loss. Okay, so revenues and expenses are the only kind of accounts that go into that income statement. Assets and liabilities are not going to show us whether a company is profitable or not. So they do not go on the income statement. As we're copying these numbers over, we have to make sure the debits are still debits, credits are still credits. Okay, and then we're going to find a difference at the bottom of the income statement columns, the difference between the revenues, which have credit balances, and the expenses, which have debit balances. We're going to find that difference. Okay, if it's a positive number, it's net income. If it's a negative number, it's net loss. Okay, and so we're going to show that net income on there and total it up and make sure it's all good. Okay, and then we're going to use these columns when we go to do the income statement, when we prepare financial statements, and everything we need is right there. Okay, so again, this is just telling us the income statement columns include revenues and expenses only. Okay, so here's our revenue account. That's delivery fees, and that was $21.50 credit, so we copy it over as a $21.50 credit. Then we have all of our expenses, and we're copying them over. They're all debit balance, so we copy them all over as debit balances. So now we have our revenue. We have only one revenue account, and all of our expense accounts are all copied over into their correct column in the income statement. Now we have to total up the debits and total up the credits. So my total debits is $11.35. My total credits is $21.50. I have to find the difference between them. So the $21.50 is my revenue. The $11.35 total is all my expenses. So revenue minus expenses is, if it's positive, it's net income. If it was negative, it'd be a net loss. But in this case, it's positive, so we have net income of $1,015. Now we're going to put that net income under the smaller number. So 2150 is bigger, 1135 is smaller, so we're going to put the 1015 underneath the smaller number, which is the 1135. And notice we have written net income over to the side. Now I can total up the 1135 and the 1015 and 2150 plus 0, and now the two numbers will equal. Okay, but the only way I could get the debits and credits to equal was to add this net income to one side. In other words, on this adjusted trial balance, my accounting equation balances because my total debits equal my total credits. But over here in the income statement column, I don't have the total debits and the total credits. I only have one credit, and I have some of the debits. So I'm not going to balance right off the get-go. My total credits and my total debits are not going to be the same. So, but it's the net income, that difference between those two, when I add it back in, then finally they will equal. Now, if you were doing an income statement, which is one of the financial statements we're going to learn how to do in the next module, if you don't happen to have a worksheet, you can still do the income statement. You just use the adjusted trial balance, and you have all the revenues and the expenses are right there on the adjusted trial balance. You just have to remember, only use the revenues and expenses. Don't be adding in assets and stuff like that. Okay? So the worksheet is nice because you've already figured out which of those accounts and whatnot. So that works out well. But if you don't happen to have the worksheet, you can still figure out an income statement straight from the adjusted trial balance. And you won't have a net income check figure either.